Have you ever wondered why some men step into a woman's life? Not to love her, not to build with her, but to test how much of herself she's willing to give. High-value women get targeted the most, not because they're weak, but because their heart, strength, and standards make insecure men feel small. Today, we're breaking down the 9 psychological traps men use on powerful women. And trust me, most women don't even notice number 3. High-value women walk differently. They don't chase, they don't beg, they don't shrink. But that's exactly what triggers men who don't feel enough, and when a man feels outmatched, he doesn't always walk away. Sometimes, he plays tricks to pull her down to his level. The biggest issue, these traps aren't obvious. They're subtle, emotional, and disguised as love, attention, or care. And unless a woman knows what to look for, she'll confuse manipulation for affection and end up questioning her own worth. Okay, let's unpack the 9 psychological traps men use on high-value women, but most don't notice one. The "you're too much" trap is one of the oldest psychological games insecure men use on high-value women. He makes her feel like her standards are unreasonable, too demanding, too unrealistic. But what he really wants is permission to give less. It starts subtly. He doesn't attack her directly. He attacks her expectations. He might say things like, "Why do you always need so much?" Or, "Not everything has to be perfect." Or, "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." At first, she thinks he's just overwhelmed or tired. She thinks maybe she's asking for too much attention, too much clarity, too much emotional effort. But slowly, this trap begins to work its way into her mind. She starts questioning herself instead of questioning his lack of effort. And that's exactly what he wants, because if he can make a high-value woman feel like her standards are the problem, he never has to rise to meet them. He doesn't have to communicate better, doesn't have to show consistency, doesn't have to give reassurance, respect, or responsibility. He just has to convince her that expecting these things makes her too much. It's psychological manipulation hiding behind emotional sensitivity. He wants the perks of having a strong, loving, emotionally intelligent woman without doing the work required to keep her. And the easiest way to achieve that is to make her shrink. If she feels like she's too much, she'll lower her expectations. If she lowers her expectations, he doesn't have to grow. If he doesn't have to grow, the relationship stays on his terms, and that's the entire point of the trap. The danger is how gentle it can appear. He doesn't yell. He sighs. He doesn't reject her. He minimizes her. He doesn't say she's wrong. He says she's a lot. And she tries to adjust because she cares. High-value women often think improvement means being flexible, patient, understanding. So she bends a little, softens, holds back her needs, tones down her standards. But the more she shrinks, the more he slacks. Suddenly, the effort she once received becomes rare. The affection becomes inconsistent. The communication becomes vague. And she begins to wonder why she feels lonely standing next to someone who claims to care about her. This trap works only when she forgets who she is, because strong women aren't too much. Their standards are built from wisdom, from experience, from knowing their worth. Asking for honesty isn't too much. Asking for consistency isn't too much. Asking for respect, effort, and reliability isn't too much. Those are the basics, the bare minimum. What's too much is a man wanting full access to her heart while giving her half effort in return. What's too much is expecting her to lower her standards so he can stay comfortable. What's too much is demanding she accept less so he doesn't have to become more. The truth is simple. A man who says she's too much is telling her he is too little. And once she realizes that, the trap loses its power instantly, because the moment a high-value woman sees the game, she refuses to play it. 2. The push-pull trap is one of the most manipulative tactics insecure men use on Sigma females. He gives attention today, disappears tomorrow. Not because he's busy, because confusion gives him control over Sigma females. When Sigma females feel emotionally pulled and pushed, he gains the power he never earned. It starts with intensity. He comes in warm, enthusiastic, maybe even slightly obsessed. He sends long messages, compliments her, pays attention to every detail. He creates a feeling of connection that seems genuine. And just when she starts to relax, he pulls away without warning. He goes silent, short messages, dry responses, slow replies. He suddenly becomes busy, overwhelmed, unavailable. But here's what's important. His schedule didn't change. His intention did. The push-pull trap is psychological conditioning. He gives her emotional warmth, then takes it away just long enough to make her question what she did wrong, because once she starts questioning, he gains leverage. Sigma females, despite being strong and self-contained, still feel deeply. They value sincerity. So when a man changes his behavior overnight, they try to understand the shift. They don't chase out of desperation, they chase out of clarity. They want honesty, consistency, understanding, but he uses that sincerity against them. He knows Sigma females are rare. He knows their loyalty isn't easily given. So when he senses he doesn't measure up to her standards, he tries to level the playing field the only way he can, by destabilizing her emotionally. The push brings hope. The pull brings confusion, and confusion creates vulnerability. It's a loop. He gives a little, takes a lot, then gives a little again. Just enough to keep her emotionally tethered, just enough to stop her from walking away, just enough to keep her wondering if she misunderstood everything. It's not love. It's not connection. It's control disguised as inconsistency. Meanwhile, the Sigma female slowly loses her inner balance without realizing why. She starts replaying conversations, analyzing texts, trying to figure out what changed. But nothing changed. This was his plan from the beginning, because a man who feels inferior cannot match a Sigma female's energy, so he disrupts it. But the mistake insecure men make is assuming Sigma females stay confused for long. They don't. Once she sees the pattern, the sudden warmth, the cold withdrawal, the inconsistent affection, everything clicks. She realizes nothing was wrong with her. She realizes the shift had everything to do with his insecurity. She realizes he pushes when he wants validation and pulls when he wants control. And once she understands the cycle, she detaches from it completely. That's where the trap collapses, because the push-pull tactic only works when she's emotionally engaged. The moment she regains clarity, the game ends. She stops reacting to the pushes. She stops caring about the pulls. She stops giving meaning to inconsistency. Confusion turns into certainty, and certainty turns into distance. The power he thought he had disappears instantly, because nothing terrifies an insecure man more than a Sigma female who finally sees through the inconsistency he used to control her, and when she sees the truth, she doesn't break. She walks. Every time. Hold on for a moment. If this is already hitting too close, tap like so more women catch this message. All right. Let's get into trap number 3. 3. The I didn't mean it like that. Trap is one of the most subtle forms of emotional manipulation, and most high-value women don't recognize it until they're already affected by it. He says something hurtful, then blames her reaction. He rewrites the moment so she questions her own intuition. This is emotional gaslighting, and most high-value women miss it because they assume he's being honest. It usually begins with something small, a comment disguised as a joke, a criticism hidden under a soft tone, a sentence that lands heavier than he expected her to admit. She reacts because she felt the sting. She responds because her intuition caught the shift, but instead of taking responsibility, he flips the narrative instantly. He says she's too sensitive, or reading too much into it, or creating drama out of nothing. And in that moment, the trap quietly takes hold. The goal isn't to win the argument. The goal is to make her doubt her emotional reality. The moment she starts second-guessing what she heard, what she felt, or what she interpreted, he gains psychological control without raising his voice or showing any obvious aggression. High-value women often fall for this trap because they lead with empathy. They want to believe people mean well. They want to assume the best. So when a man says he didn't mean it like that, they give him the benefit of the doubt. not because they're naive, but because they're emotionally intelligent enough to consider multiple perspectives. But emotional intelligence becomes a weakness when it's given to someone who uses it as a shield against accountability. He learns quickly that he can hurt her, then escape responsibility by shifting the blame to her reaction. He watches her soften. He watches her apologize for expressing pain. He watches her shrink her intuition just to keep the peace. And every time she backs down, he grows bolder. Over time, the trap becomes a cycle. He says something disrespectful. She reacts naturally. He denies the intention. She doubts herself. He feels validated. She becomes quieter. Eventually, she begins censoring her feelings before she even speaks. She tries to avoid conflict by minimizing her truth. She wonders if she's overreacting, even when she isn't. She begins to rely on his version of events instead of her own inner wisdom. That is exactly what emotional gaslighting is designed to do. It disconnects a woman from her intuition, so she becomes easier to control. But here's the twist. High-value women don't stay confused forever. They start noticing that their emotional reactions make sense, even when he insists they don't. They start noticing patterns in his words, tone, and timing. They start realizing the same thing keeps happening, no matter how gentle they are. And one day, the moment comes when the fog lifts. She realizes he never intended to soothe her feelings. He intended to protect his ego. She realizes he wasn't confused by her reaction. He was threatened by her clarity. She realizes he didn't mean it differently. He meant it exactly the way she heard it. And once a high-value woman reconnects with her intuition, the gaslighting loses every ounce of power it ever had. 4. The prove you care. Trap is one of the most manipulative games insecure men use when they feel intimidated by a Sigma female's strength. He tests Sigma female loyalty by withholding attention, trying to see how much effort a Sigma female will put in to earn him. The trap works only when Sigma females feel responsible for proving their place, and that's exactly what he counts on. It starts subtly. He becomes distant for no real reason. His replies get shorter. His tone changes. He delays conversations he once seemed excited about. He creates emotional space, not because he needs time, but because he wants to see how she reacts to the shift. He wants to see if she chases. He wants to see if she adjusts her behavior. He wants to see if she tries harder to pull him closer. In his mind, her effort becomes proof that she's invested. But here's the truth he hides. He doesn't want love. He wants reassurance. And the easiest way to get reassurance is to make a Sigma female feel like she's losing him. When she senses the distance, the natural instinct is to seek clarity. Sigma females value honesty and emotional alignment, so they check in. They ask questions. They try to understand what's wrong, but instead of answering, he pulls away more. He gives vague explanations. He says he's tired, thinking, or not sure what he wants. Knowing these half answers will keep her trying to fix the space he created. This is the trap. He withholds warmth to measure hers. He withholds attention to measure her loyalty. He withholds affection to test her patience. The more she gives, the more powerful he feels. The more she tries, the more in control he believes he is. This dynamic only works if the Sigma female forgets her own worth, because Sigma females naturally care deeply. They give love with intention. They commit fully. So when someone they care about withdraws, they initially respond with compassion, not suspicion. But the problem is he interprets her compassion as weakness. He confuses her effort with dependency. He mistakes her emotional maturity for insecurity. And that's when he pushes the test even further. He wants to see how long she'll hold on, how long she'll accept breadcrumbs, how long she'll stay patient, how long she'll try to fix something he keeps breaking. The trap collapses the moment she realizes what he's doing. Because once a Sigma female recognizes she's being tested, everything changes. She sees the pattern of vague distance. She sees the emotional manipulation behind his silence. She sees that he isn't confused. He's calculating. And when she sees it, she stops participating. She stops proving anything. She stops chasing clarity he refuses to give. She stops doing emotional work he never reciprocated. A Sigma female doesn't stay where she is treated as an option she has to fight for. She doesn't beg to be valued. She doesn't compete for someone who doesn't appreciate who she already is. She steps back, and the moment she steps back, the entire game ends. Because the only way the prove you care trap works is if she keeps trying, and Sigma females don't keep trying once they see they are being tested instead of loved. They walk away with quiet certainty, knowing love is never something they should have to earn. 5. The I like you better. When trap is one of the most subtle and damaging psychological games insecure men use, especially when they feel threatened by a woman's natural strength. He subtly criticizes her personality, style, or confidence, trying to shape her into someone less intimidating. It starts quietly. He gives compliments with edges. He praises her with conditions. He says things like, "I like you better when you're calm," or "I like you better when you don't dress up too much," or "I like you better when you don't take things so seriously." At first it sounds harmless, even caring. It's easy to mistake it for preference or personal taste, but what he's really doing is planting seeds of doubt in her mind, seeds that make her question the very things that make her powerful, unique, and magnetic. High-value women often don't notice this trap immediately because the criticism is wrapped in soft language. He's not yelling. He's not insulting her directly. He's just sharing his opinion. But the goal isn't honesty. The goal is control. Every time he says, "I like you better," when he is telling her who she needs to become in order to make him comfortable. He wants her to tone down the parts of herself that feel too big for him. He wants her to dim her light, so his insecurities stay hidden in the shadows. He wants her to soften the edges he feels threatened by. And the more she listens, the more she shrinks. She starts changing small things first. Maybe she becomes quieter. Maybe she stops wearing certain outfits. Maybe she stops expressing strong opinions, dreams, or boundaries. Maybe she becomes hesitant with her confidence. She tells herself she's just being considerate, being thoughtful, being flexible in the relationship. But slowly, she begins losing the authority she once had over her own identity. That's exactly how the trap works. He pushes her toward a version of herself that feels safer for him to handle. Less bold, less expressive, less independent, less self-assured, because if he can mold her identity, he can control the dynamic. He believes that if she relies on his approval, she won't leave him. He believes that if he becomes the voice in her head, he becomes the guide for her behavior. He believes that if he chips away at her confidence gently enough, she won't notice the missing pieces. But here's the irony he never expects. Strong women notice changes in themselves. High-value women eventually wake up and wonder why they feel smaller, quieter, and less alive than they used to. They recognize the discomfort in suppressing their natural energy, and once they trace that discomfort back to his conditional affection, the entire illusion breaks. She realizes he didn't want a partner, he wanted control. She realizes his preferences were attempts to weaken her confidence. She realizes he felt threatened by the very qualities that made her unforgettable, and the moment she understands this, she stops changing for him. She stops adjusting her personality. She stops editing herself to make him comfortable. She stops shrinking to fit into his small expectations. A woman who sees this trap clearly becomes impossible to manipulate. She returns to herself, and the version she returns to is always stronger than the one he tried to create. Quick pause. If you're still here, you're definitely a high-value woman yourself. Make sure you're subscribed, because these weekly breakdowns are made exactly for you. Okay, let's move into Trap 6. 6. The silent punishment. Trap is one of the most manipulative tactics insecure men use when they feel a Sigma female slipping out of their control. Instead of communicating, he shuts down. He uses silence to make a Sigma female feel guilty. He stops talking, stops showing affection, hoping Sigma females will take the blame and try harder to fix what he caused. It always starts with a shift in his behavior, not a conversation. He becomes distant, cold, detached. He pulls back emotionally without giving a single explanation. One day he is warm and connected, the next he is a wall. No texts, no eye contact, no effort, no clarity. The air becomes heavy, confusing, and tense, and because Sigma females value emotional alignment, they immediately sense something is off. But instead of telling her what's wrong, he sits in silence, waiting for her to feel uncomfortable, waiting for her to panic, waiting for her to question herself. This is exactly what he wants. The silent punishment is designed to make her feel responsible for a problem she didn't create. He wants her to chase after the connection, to apologize for things she didn't do, to put in emotional effort so he doesn't have to. Through silence, he positions himself as the victim and her as the cause of his distance. The goal isn't resolution. The goal is power. He knows a Sigma female naturally tries to understand, to clarify, to fix misunderstandings. She values honesty and hates emotional tension. He weaponizes those qualities against her. If she asks what's wrong, he shrugs. If she expresses concern, he says, "It's nothing." If she tries to talk, he gives one-word answers. The silence becomes louder than any argument. It makes her overthink. It makes her wonder if she misread something. It makes her feel responsible for his mood. It makes her believe she has to earn his affection back. But the truth is brutal. He wants her to work harder so he doesn't have to. He wants her to carry the emotional load. He wants her to feel insecure enough to accept less. A Sigma female might try to close the distance at first, not because she's weak, but because she values clarity over confusion. But the longer it continues, the clearer the manipulation becomes. She starts noticing how his silence appears only when he wants control. She notices how he communicates normally with others, but freezes only with her. She notices how his mood lifts the moment she apologizes, even if he caused the tension. She realizes his silence isn't hurt, it's strategy. And once she sees the pattern, the trap breaks instantly. A Sigma female will not beg for words that should come freely. She will not chase a man who punishes her for wanting clarity. She will not carry guilt designed to keep her small. When she recognizes silent punishment for what it is, she emotionally disconnects. She stops trying. She stops explaining. She stops investing. She shifts her energy back to herself, and the moment she does, the silence that once controlled her loses all of its power. And the man who relied on silence suddenly realizes he has nothing left to hold over her. 7. The future faker trap is one of the most misleading psychological games insecure men use because it hides behind beautiful words instead of honest actions. He promises the world without giving anything real. He uses dreams as a distraction from his lack of action. It always starts the same way, with grand visions and big declarations about the future he claims he wants with her. He talks about trips they'll take, the life they'll build, the goals they'll accomplish together. He paints a picture so vivid and so romantic that any woman would naturally lean in, and for a moment it feels safe to believe him. But the future he describes is not a plan, it's bait. He uses fantasy to keep her emotionally invested without having to do the work required in the present. He says all the right things because words cost him nothing. And he knows a strong woman listens with her heart open, hoping his dreams match her values. At first, she feels excited. She feels chosen. She feels like there is something meaningful forming between them. But the promise slowly begins to crumble when she realizes his words live in tomorrow, while his actions remain stuck in yesterday. He says he wants commitment, but avoids real conversations. He says he wants stability, but keeps creating chaos. He says he wants honesty, but hides pieces of himself. He says he wants a future, but treats the present like it's optional. Future faking works because it gives her hope while asking nothing from him. He never has to show up consistently. He never has to build trust. He never has to be reliable. He just has to keep talking about someday, and someday becomes the leash. Every time she gets frustrated, he brings up the future again, knowing it will soothe her concerns long enough to reset the cycle. It is manipulation wrapped in romantic language. Over time, she starts to feel the imbalance deeply. She begins to notice how heavy her effort feels. She sees the gap between what he promises and what he provides. She starts recognizing the emotional exhaustion of carrying a relationship built only on imagination. She realizes she is in love with a vision, but dealing with a man who refuses to grow into it. Future fakers rely on words to secure loyalty they never earn with action. They want the benefits of emotional intimacy without the responsibilities that come with it. They want admiration without effort. They want commitment without accountability. But here's the turning point. A strong woman eventually stops hearing his fantasies and starts watching his behavior. And his behavior always tells the truth. When she sees the truth clearly, the spell breaks. She stops waiting. She stops believing. She stops holding on to promises that never turn real. And when she walks away, he loses the audience he needed to keep his illusions alive. She realizes real love shows in the present, not imaginary futures. She sees consistency matters more than empty promises. She understands a man who truly wants her will build now. With that clarity, she frees herself completely. Before we go on, drop a comment saying, "I see the pattern now," if you're done falling for these emotional shortcuts. All right, trap number 8. 8. The jealousy trigger. Trap is one of the most toxic tools insecure men use when they feel threatened by a Sigma female's independence. He flirts with others or talks about options just to trigger insecurity in the Sigma female. He wants Sigma females to compete for him because competition keeps her distracted from his lack of effort. It begins subtly, with small comments he pretends are jokes. He might mention someone who likes his vibe, or casually bring up a woman who understands him better. He might talk about how other women give him attention, or how someone complimented him earlier. Each comment is designed to hit a specific emotional nerve, not because he wants her to leave, but because he wants her to stay unsettled. The goal isn't attraction, it's imbalance. If a Sigma female feels destabilized, he believes she will try harder to secure the connection. He thinks she'll pour more energy into him just to regain the emotional footing he intentionally shook. Men who play this game rely on comparison to control. They want the Sigma female to feel like she's in silent competition with people she never agreed to compete with. They want her to feel less confident, more unsure, more reactive, because the more distracted she becomes by imaginary rivals, the less she notices his lack of consistency, commitment, or genuine intimacy. Jealousy becomes his shield, hiding everything he isn't. Instead of improving himself, he uses insecurity as leverage. Instead of giving her real emotional safety, he gives her uncertainty dressed as honesty. But here is what he forgets. Sigma females don't thrive in competition. They thrive in clarity. They don't chase validation. They embody it. So at first, when the jealousy triggers appear, she is confused, not threatened. She wonders why he is bringing up other women instead of deepening their connection. She wonders why he needs attention from everyone except the woman he claims to want. Over time, the pattern becomes painfully clear. He is not trying to build with her. He is trying to test her. He is not trying to grow emotionally. He is trying to control the dynamic. He is not seeking partnership. He is seeking dominance through insecurity. The Sigma female eventually realizes he doesn't want commitment. He wants competition. And the moment she understands this, everything shifts. She stops reacting to his jealousy games. She stops caring about the names he drops. She stops giving emotional energy to someone who feeds off her discomfort. She sees the trap for what it is, a desperate attempt to keep her focused on him instead of herself. And once she sees it clearly, the jealousy tactic collapses instantly. A Sigma female will never compete for a man who cannot even compete with his own immaturity. She will never fight for attention that should be freely given. She will never cling to someone who uses insecurity as romance. She simply walks away with her dignity intact, knowing any man who creates jealousy is revealing his deepest fear, that he was never enough to keep her without manipulation. She sees he hoped she would ignore. 9. The "you need me" trap is one of the most insecure tactics a man uses when he senses a woman's strength is greater than anything he can offer. He tries to convince her she's lucky to have him, when the truth is, he's terrified she'll realize she was fine before he arrived. This trap doesn't start with arrogance, it starts with fear. He knows she brings value, stability, softness, and depth into his life. He knows her presence makes everything feel calmer, more meaningful, more grounded. And deep down, he also knows he hasn't done much to deserve that kind of woman. So instead of becoming better, he tries to convince her she wouldn't be okay without him. He plants quiet doubts. He says things like, "I'm the only one who gets you," or "No one will treat you like I do," or "You don't understand how rare I am." He frames himself as irreplaceable, not through action, but through manipulation. The irony is that nothing he's saying is true. He's not the only one who understands her. He's just the loudest one in the room. He's not the only one who could love her. He's simply the one trying the hardest to limit her options. He's not rare. He's simply threatened. His goal is to shrink her world until he becomes the center of it. Not through kindness, not through effort, through fear. If she believes she needs him, she won't leave. If she believes she can't do better, she won't question his behavior. If she believes he's a gift, she'll overlook the ways he drains, dismisses, or disrespects her. A woman who doubts her worth becomes easier to control. But this trap collapses fast around high-value women because they eventually notice the pattern. They notice he speaks more about his importance than his responsibilities. They notice he brags more about what he provides than actually providing it. They notice he builds narratives instead of building trust. They notice how often he reminds her of his value because he knows she's starting to notice her own. The more he tries to convince her she needs him, the more obvious it becomes that he needs her far more. He needs her strength to feel relevant. He needs her emotional maturity to stabilize his chaos. He needs her loyalty to compensate for his inconsistency. He needs her confidence to hide his insecurity. The trap falls apart the moment she remembers who she was before him, a whole woman, capable, stable, grounded, loved by her own life. And once she reconnects with her independence, the spell breaks completely. She realizes she didn't depend on him. She accommodated him. She realizes she wasn't being lifted. She was being limited. She realizes he wasn't offering support. He was offering possession. A high-value woman doesn't stay where her identity is minimized. She doesn't cling to someone who tries to make her smaller. She doesn't confuse dependency with love. When she walks away, he isn't losing someone who needed him. He's losing someone he hoped would never realize she didn't. High-value women aren't hard to love. They're just hard to manipulate. And that simple truth is what so many insecure men struggle to accept. Every trap they use, every mind game they play, every emotional shortcut they rely on comes from one single place: fear. Fear of losing control, fear of not being enough, fear of being seen for who they really are. A woman who knows her worth isn't confused by mixed signals. She doesn't cling to crumbs disguised as affection. She isn't impressed by future promises that never make it into the present. She pays attention to patterns, not excuses. She listens to energy, not empty words. She watches behavior, not intentions. When something feels off, she doesn't ignore it. When someone shows inconsistency, she believes them the first time. When a man tries to twist her reality, she centers herself even deeper. High-value women don't fall for emotional shortcuts because they understand that real connection isn't built through games, pressure, confusion, or insecurity. It's built through clarity, honesty, and consistency. And when those things are missing, she rises. She grows. She chooses herself, even if it means walking away from someone she cared for, because peace will always matter more than potential. Self-respect will always matter more than attachment, and her future will always matter more than someone who tries to hold her back. So tell me this, have you ever seen any of these traps up close? Has someone ever tried to make you doubt yourself, shrink yourself, or prove yourself just to keep them comfortable? Drop your story below. Your experience might be the reminder another woman needs tonight. And if you want more real talk about strength, self-worth, and the psychology behind modern dating, watch the next video on your screen. Seriously, don't miss it.